You know, in a society today that we question so many things that have gone astray and things I talk to you about all the time on the show and our production, we cover a wide spectrum of things. Today is a special production, which we're happy to bring to you in a live stream, which we'll be doing more of again. But I thought, you know what, if we're going to do a live stream, first and foremost, we should pick a topic where we can't possibly go wrong. So we chose God, this particular case. And having said that, it's a pleasure of mine. This is the second go-around that I have the pleasure of sitting and interviewing Vassula Ryden. Vassula Ryden, spelt R-Y-D-E-N. And as you've seen some of our posts around the world and some of our conversation, Vassula is certainly a visionary. She is a messenger. Many people call her a prophet, although she doesn't herself. Her book is fascinating. I just finished reading it. Heaven is real, but so is hell. So it's a striking message, and one that certainly stops you in your tracks to question, what exactly are we saying here? So lots to discuss in the next hour or so. So buckle your seatbelt, enjoy, and we'll get right to it here. Vassula, thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm, for inviting me here.
Well, I said to you when we talked a few weeks ago, I said to you, when you do the live book tour, because the book just came out, right?
Yes. Thank you for inviting me.
Wonderful to have you, and I know you have a book signing and many other things you'll be doing, so it's wonderful to have you here for the next few hours with us. So let's start off with this journey of yours, and I want to really impact folks in the next hour. I want this to be a very dynamic conversation. I believe whatever one's view is, there's something to learn from you, having just finished your book and your message. One of the things I just realized, Vassula, is that this didn't happen to you last week, last month, last year. I didn't know that, and until I really read the book and understood. This has been a lifelong mission of yours, and really it comes all the way back, as I read in the book, to like 6 years old, and you had these terrifying experiences and there's some of the premonitions. Would you start there for me?
Yes, it was, I was asleep. And then I woke up suddenly because I felt something happening. And I looked straight above. And I saw two hands all the way to the wrists, but looking very ugly and old and menacing and coming to my throat like as if they would just choke me. And I was so scared because this was true. I mean, if I was just going to touch, they would be there. It wasn't just like I was closing my eyes. They were real. And they were coming to my throat to kill me. And I was so scared. But then they disappeared after I just closed my eyes and opened again so that they go away. And I told my mother the next day because I had to share that with my mother. My mother, you know, like any mother would say, don't be afraid, it was just nothing. It was maybe the Virgin Mary's hands coming to protect you. I didn't say anything anymore because I knew she wouldn't believe that there was evil. And I knew that it was very, very evil.
Well, you knew something was wrong.
Very wrong, very wrong.
And you were only 6 years old, so this is pretty small.
Already there, I had this terrible sign. And I used to see other things, like, for instance, every night I used to see this black dog with red eyes threatening me to tear me to pieces. And every night I used to see this. But I couldn't understand as a child that this could be demonic. Like, you know, the demon can take any shape. Could be a dog, could be an animal, could be an angel of light, could be the appearance of Jesus. He could take any shape. He's a spirit. But this eventually, much later on in the years, I figured out that was Satan was after my heels because he guessed. He's a good analyzing person, like a psychologist. He would guess, you know how? By the quantity of angels God would put, and the rank of angel God would put to somebody who's got a mission. So he'd be after that person since a child.
Interesting. At age 10, one of your first premonitions, interesting story, was a vacation from Egypt to Lebanon, as I read here. Suddenly, an inexplicable fear seized me, filling my entire being with terror. I began to tremble and burst into tears. Somehow I knew, without a doubt, that death was waiting for me on the journey to Lebanon, and I knew that if I went on that trip, I would not return alive. So, and then you had an interaction with your mother, and your mom.
She was very much, she believed me by, she's very open to, I would say, mystical experiences and all that. So she believed me, and she canceled completely the journey and waited for a sign, more or less. And when the next sign came to me was when Jesus appeared to me, all the way to his waist, nothing more. It was like a picture. He was smiling with his head a little bit tilted, and every time he said to me, looked at me, come to me. I was drawn like a magnet, coming. Without me walking, I was just pulled, some force was pulling me towards him. And the second time he said, come to me again. And I started to get afraid that I can't control, my feet, anything. But just by the words, come to me, I was drawn closer. The third time, I felt his face, stuck on my face, and I went through his face. And that was a sign for my mother, now we can travel. But she changed country to make sure.
She did?
Yes.
Well, you've traveled all over the world. You've lived in many areas of the world, yeah?
Yes, I lived many places because of my husband's job. So he worked for the UN, and we used to travel a lot. But I travel a lot. And then, of course, with this mission, in 80 countries, they invited me to talk about my experiences and why is God speaking to us in our times. That is a big question.
A lot of people may not realize, and maybe this gives hopes to the troublemakers out there, but you were a bit of a class clown in school, huh?
Yes.
Tell us.
I was very naughty in school. I was, let's say, a bad pupil. That was it. I was good in art, and you'll see some of my drawings. I was good in geography and English, but the rest, when the teacher used to come in, she used to, where is she sitting? All right, get out of class. Because she knew I would be like teasing and troublemaker, and she used to throw me out of class all the time. So I was not a good pupil at all.
We have something in common there. But I certainly was accused many times of being that class clown, too. You had this interesting story about death as well I want to touch before we leave this subject. You were carrying a couple of bottles when one of them fell and broke, causing a sharp fragment to cut your left ankle. And in your mind, you saw those ugly, satanic, again, hands which had come for your neck when you were a small child that you just spoke about a moment ago here, right? And in panic, you shot up, overturning the meal tray, trying desperately to breathe, and you could feel that death was closing in on me. And you describe many of these circumstances very, very vividly, Vassula, in the book. That particular episode, there was something more to that episode. Tell us.
Well, it was, always on my neck, getting threatened, my breath cutting out. It was an arrest of my breath because that cut was so bad, it started to get infected so bad that the doctor was afraid that he had to cut my leg out, and because it was turning into a gangrene. And then he said, all right, I can deal with that. I'll give you a shot of morphine. He gave me perhaps an overdose because I was very skinny, and with my weight you have to see how much you can give. So it was an overdose that affected my lungs, and they were stopping. I couldn't breathe at all. It was just like somebody put something there, and I was not able to breathe, and I was dying. My husband was there. I had a tray in the bed in the hospital with the food that had just come. I couldn't breathe, and I stood up on the bed, throwing everything down. And since, when you have no breath, you have no voice. And I just made signs that I was dying to my husband. He ran out to bring a nurse. He couldn't find anybody in the corridor. And then I sat thinking, now that's the end. But then it was like somebody pulled out a plug and I could breathe. And it was an attack, another attack. Very near death.
So, Vassula, you've had many of these through your life, starting as a young child, 6 years old, all the way through to today. And so, listen, I mean, I don't know how any of us relate the bad times in our lives. We all have challenging times, but it seems like, obviously, you started to take a look at all of these, and, I mean, there was a kind of a pattern happening here, I think.
It was, because it wasn't just that. I mean, I used to see Jesus a lot in my dreams, and they'll say, some people will say, well, you know, this is just dreams. Not when it is with Jesus, very clear, like a three-dimension dream.
Right.
It's a vision. It becomes a vision. So I had been like being prepared to what was going to be given to me much later on, back in 1985.
You know, as I think about it right now, as you just said that, I remember also seeing a couple of points which really was an eye-opener, where you were at some meetings and conferences and other people were there, and a vision of Jesus was, I think I read a couple of things, was shown on your face in some particular occasions, and on some other occasions on a screen in the room. Is that correct?
That's correct. Well, this is after 1985. That was 1985, after. It wasn't before the Lord approaching me and starting to call me, giving me messages. But he said in the beginning, when he started to talk to me, and I could hear him inside, and it's called locution, by the way, you know, the proper word, locution. He said, when I said, but people will not believe me. You know, it's so difficult in our times to come up and say, you know, God speaks to me. And, you know, they'll take you for a fool, or there are so many others there that say God speaks to me, and they're not true, really. So it's just like a mountain in front of me. How can I make people believe? Give me a sign, a sign. And then he said to me, the only sign I shall give is you. And I shall appear in your place. And he does. So a lot, we have testimonies all over the world without them knowing that phrase, that while I'm talking, he just rubs me out, and it's he who is appearing, and people see him. Sometimes they see him all the way there, sometimes the whole thing. And sometimes, you know, in a church where I was speaking and transmitting the messages of Christ, suddenly I saw a whole group of young people kneeling simultaneously. And I said, why are they kneeling? You know, while I was talking. But then I found out later on that he appeared while I was talking. And at that moment, when he does that, there's a lot of healings going on.
Yeah. It's fascinating as you tell that, and I want to talk in a moment here about some of the more negative thoughts that have happened, where non-believers I'm speaking of, you know, and that sort of thing, and as well as how one gets those signs and really come to the point of believing, as you say. And I hear a lot of stories. Now, I grew up in the church myself as a young Protestant boy, the Nazarene, Church of the Nazarene. And you know, the Nazarene Church is very strict. You know, you can't, you can't belong to the church if you, whatever, drink, dance, smoke, play cards, or what have you. You can't, that's the way it is, you know, like a lot of religions. Let me ask you about that, because I want to talk to you a minute about religion as a whole. I always felt as a young man, Vassula, and growing up after that, that there were an awful lot of man-made laws. Now, listen, the first time I ever went into a Catholic church, I was like about 15, 16 years old. I'd never been in one, and I had never seen all of the pomp and pageantry that goes. It was like really an awakening to me. It's like I'd never seen that sort of, you know. But then as I started to discover more of the pieces, and then when I had read the Bible, it seemed to me, now this was my opinion, there are an enormous amount of man-made laws in the translation of the Bible to really real life. And there's something I read in here which it talks about that the Lord taught me never to take a passage from the Scriptures out of context and try to understand or explain its full meaning. That grabbed me, that statement, because I think that's probably one of the things we've failed at as a people goes.
Yes, because they quote one passage and they say, the Lord said this, and that's it. But the Lord taught me because as you know, or maybe I didn't say it here now, I had never had any catechism in my life, no Bible study, no theology, nothing. And I was not even practicing my own faith to go to my church and pray and celebrate Easter like one should, or Christmas, never. I was not interested. In fact, when there was a magazine talking about God, I used to bleep over it because I was just, no, I'm not interested. That sort of person I was. And yet, look what happened.
Right.
But then, when the Lord started to teach me about the Bible, how to read, he says, for instance, I'll give you an example. About our times, they have been predicted, and these end of times, that are not the end of the world, but end of times. He said, open, and I had to work with the Bible next to me because he used to say, Jesus, open the scriptures, but he didn't tell me so-and-so passage. He told me, I'm going to put your hand where it is that I want you to read, and you spot it there, it's going to be there. So it's very quick, the learning of Jesus. It's really, I would say, crash course, like a crash course. So I used to open, and then 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, fit it together with 28 Ezekiel. Put the two together and you'll find the meaning. That's the way he taught me. So what was it? It was the end of times, the two signs that you'll recognize them, that we are fully up to the neck with these end of times. And that is, the first sign is the falling away from God, rejection of God, complete rejection of faith, and no more belief in God. The second one is the spirit of rebellion. That's full blast here, everywhere in the world, you know. So the two signs, and that people will play God, like imitating God, and that is Ezekiel, combined with Thessalonians. So this is the way he taught me to read the Bible, the scriptures, and it makes sense.
Well, you know, when sure, but when you first open the Bible, and again, for me, and you start to read Genesis forward, the Old Testament, I mean, Genesis really does scare the hell out of you, you know? I mean, really, it's not a place to start, I don't
think. It's difficult to understand, and there's a lot of metaphoric sentences, and we have to know which is metaphoric and no, but then you have to put it together with other passages to get to understand what's happening.
Well, you know, again, you're growing up in the church. You're really we spent, as I remember, most of the time in the New Testament and talking about, you know, these times. And but yet, when you do start reading Genesis forward in the Old Testament, and you know, you see that they're living to 800-900 years. It's unbelievable, of course. You know, we're just trying to get 100 years now in this lifetime, let alone 800 or 900. Could you imagine living to 800-900 years old?
That's impossible.
Yeah, but you know, it wasn't possible then, was it?
No. Yeah. I think it was true because the creation had to multiply. So you know, that's probably one of the things.
Yeah. That, and I think there was more time for us to get in trouble, maybe. We got a little shorter time, maybe, to get in trouble and get out. But so, do you agree? I mean, just before we leave this, do you agree or not agree that well, many of the religions here today have, again, you know, not to be crass, but have taken the Bible and use it as they see fit. Again, not to be ugly here, but to use it for their own self-driven agendas. That's what I feel. Am I off base on this?
You know, I'll tell you something, and I tell people, what is the Bible? You can describe it in one sentence: to be good, love God and neighbor. It's the whole thing together. That's the Bible is to be, because I learned from Jesus that in Judgment Day, we all believe at least in the Judgment Day, there will be a Judgment Day, we shall all be judged according to the measure of the love we had here on earth. That is, love is so important. To love your neighbor, serve your neighbor, love God. This is really so important because the Lord said that the more love you have, the more virtues you have. It's like a mother, that from the mother descend children, and all the other virtues come from love. So the bigger the love, the more virtues. The less love, the less virtues. Yeah. But love is the key to heaven.
Yeah, I believe that is true. You made a statement that I thought was just pretty wild in the book. I experienced a spiritual poverty as never before, as though an immaterial fire ripped my clothing off.
Yes, this is the day of the Lord. This is an explanation of the day of the Lord. Because, hey, I mean, I explained how I was before, and then comes this, the materializing of my angel, Daniel. His name was Daniel, is Daniel. And he said, God is near you and loves you. These were the first words of this supernatural world, I would say, coming to me. God is near you and loves you. So when I heard this and I saw my angel, people ask, how do you see him? Do I see as I see you, Malcom? No. I see him with the eyes of my soul, which is interior visions. And very clear, very, very clear. The voice is so clear. I mean, I learned more English, you know, with my angel and Jesus, because my English is not perfect, as you hear. And I learned more words which I heard, and I had to look in the dictionary what it meant. So the angel, why did he come? It was to draw my attention to God. But that spiritual fire, he had to show me what I did in my life that offended God all through my life, and I never confessed my sins to him or repented or anything. And I saw myself, it was a self-revelation with God's eyes. Mm-hmm. And that's different. Whatever you can say, how much you can see, how much you did wrong, you'll never see it as God sees them. And that tore me into pieces, because I started to realize how wretched I was, how bad the acts I did. I saw them so big, that it hurt so much. I was in remorse, repenting, crying for 3 weeks. It went on every day, something new, until I was like, as I said, stripped naked, like I'm finished, can't go on anymore, right. That's right. It. That's when God stepped in then, in my life, and I heard him.
And it's interesting, because you say, no, I want you. You are the prototype of your generation,
That was
right?
not a compliment.
Well, and that's what you say later. You said it wasn't exactly a compliment, but thank you very much, huh? Right?
Exactly. Because of course, I knew my position, my situation, the state of my soul. So when God comes to a person like I was and speaks to me, and then Jesus comes and asks me the famous question, which house is more important, your house or my house? And then I asked him, but why did you choose me? I mean, I was a person who never really prayed or, contact with you. And he said, did you not know that wretchedness attracts me? Through your wretchedness I shall show to the world my mercy. And through your nothingness, when I said I know nothing, through your nothingness I shall show my power and my authority, and that I am. So he said, you are the prototype of your generation, because, as I said, there's out there so many in the state that I was before, and yet what does he want to tell them? Come to me as you are, and I'll turn you into a saint. Do not wait to become saints to come to me. Come to me as you are. He's all merciful. He showed his mercy through me. I mean, look how I was. So how much more he would give to others who were much better than me.
Right. Well said. There's a point to say here, and I want to talk to you a moment about what I call stepping out of the room, if you will, okay? and you kind of put it here yourself. When I'm conversing with God in the spiritual world, I still know what's going on around me in the material world. I'm present in both the material world and the supernatural world at the same time. Now, a lot of people get spooked by that when they hear that sort of thing, but I want to say to you a moment, I have a capacity in my life, Vassula. I don't like negative energy. I don't like it. I don't want it around me, and I don't like bad vibes. And so I tend to dismiss those people and move on quickly. And sometimes it comes across as being a little too out loud, sometimes, if you will. But it's always been my sort of thing. I have a habit of being in a room and stepping out of the room all the time. And I've told only a few people close to me know this, and sometimes I don't even hear what people are saying in front of me, and then I have to come back and ask them to repeat it. Now people are going to know my secret because I've just told them. But many times I'll say, could you repeat what you're saying, please, because something clicks, and I know they said something I need to hear. But I have a real problem with doing that. I always step out of the room, and I look back into the room and to see what's really going on. And I've been doing this all my life. I don't know why it drives me crazy, but I wish I could focus more. I don't know if it's ADD or AHDH or some sort of alphabet behind the name. I'm not quite sure. Or too much energy, I'm not sure. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say, to start with, when you said to me that I'm here and there, it's... now I'm going to talk in theological terms, because they told me how to, the theologians who studied my case, they said, use the proper words. All right. I'm not in a trance, to start with. I'm not in a trance. I am, when the presence of God is just so, englobing me, I can see my surrounding, but I'm not interested, because I hear him and I feel his presence that's so powerful. So, the time passes so fast. I could be like 9 hours on my knees, because he wanted me to be on my knees taking his messages for 8 years, till they were worn out, kind of. because he wanted me perhaps to pay for my sins. I don't know, but he never told me. And I could feel his presence so powerful, but if the phone rang, I would hear it. And I'll tell you this story with the phone, because one day when he was talking to me, he knew, of course, who called me. And he allowed me to pick up the phone. He stopped the message, and I went there to pick the phone. It was my mother. And she said, can you just run quickly now to the shop and buy me some bread, because, the shop is going to close in a few minutes and I need bread. And she couldn't run because she had problems with her legs. So I looked at the Lord who was near me, because he was giving me the message, and he made obey her. I said, all right. And then he said, to serve her is to serve me. Go. That was beautiful, because that is like an action that shows that he respects the serving of one another. This is a small thing for me, but for him it's great, great. And he left the message. It wasn't so important to give me the message so much as it was important to help my mother and buy her the bread. And then when I did that, he continued the message. So it means, you see, I'm not disconnected completely at all.
Yeah. Let me talk to you about, I want to touch a moment here, a couple minutes on the non-believers sort of thing, because I know that's been a piece of this here. And there are several stories you tell in the book about, different episodes where you're talking about those non-believers, how they entered your life, and the circumstances and the situations around these events. But midway through the book, you talk about the flowers from the monk, as I recall. And also, there's another story after that about the smell of incense in your home and the creaking sound in the church, all being signs of God. And then we talk about, and what gets me about this is that sometimes you'll say, well, Lord, if you're real, do this or show me this. And then you have circumstances where that happened. There are many times, I think, people that are watching, listening, and talking about, feeling the message, where, Vassula, they maybe don't, where they put something up, I don't know, maybe it's something unrealistic. They put something forward like, Lord, if you're true, do this or do that. Like we're challenging God to do something
Testing him.
Testing, right? Is that the right way? Yeah.
Testing.
Well, I see that a lot, actually, with people. Like, well, if he's really real, he'll make me a millionaire and I'll drive around in a Bentley. So what do you say to that, young lady?
It's the same sort that said to him on the cross, if you're really what you say you are, come down from the cross and prove yourself.
I recall that.
That's the same from the same tribe.
Yeah.
But let me tell you that there were people who were asking, but in good faith. It means that they weren't challenging or testing God, but really, I want to believe, but I'm not sure about it. And people were given even signs, like when it was so funny in New York. I was speaking, and there were 4 people who were doubting very much. There were other speakers, and they said, when she comes, let's go away. But they were saying, let's do it discreetly. So there were 2 big screens, because it was a big stadium, and they couldn't see the face properly. So there was my face, projected. And then suddenly, when they were about to go, Jesus appeared in one of them. They used to see him.
Right.
And he was, moving his lips at the same time as I was moving my lips. So it was not a projection of an image. And then what did Jesus do? Half his face and half my face on one of them. And they were crying, and they had to admit, we were about to leave. So these are signs. Yeah. And there were other signs as well. Yeah. Many signs there were. Yeah. Like there were glitter, there were healings, there were... we'll talk about that also, the glitter, later on.
Let's talk about the glitter.
Well, I was preparing a speech to talk about the church unity, which was my mission is also to reconcile the churches and bring them to unify in diversity. So this is the hardest part of my mission, but the Lord is really progressing it, because I'm just, going behind and doing what he wants me to say and do. So, I had prepared that speech, and it was in a pilgrimage with 800 people, 100 clergy from 17 church denominations together. And when I was preparing it, I added something a lot stronger. And then I wasn't sure when I read it that it was perhaps too strong, and I was doubting that maybe I overdid it. But somebody said to me, you have glitter all over your mouth. I said, maybe it's my lipstick, some gloss, went just around my face.
Right.
But when I went into my room, the hotel room, it was a clean suite with nice carpet. I looked around and it was so much glitter, like the ladies who put some glitter like this of all colors everywhere. Even at the edges, it was like an explosion that went like that. It was on the bed, it was on the sofa, on the chairs, on tables, on the telephone, everywhere. And I saw the glitter because that's called escarchas, the real thing. And it's a plasma, it is real, it's a living thing. It's not just, glitter that we have, paper or whatever. And it was everywhere. And I looked in the mirror and I couldn't believe it. My face was full of glitter. So I asked a theologian who has mystical theology, he's an expert. And he said, this is the sign that you glorified God and he feels glorified by you. That's the glory of God. And I tell you, I was amazed.
Yeah. Vassula, your website again is, I believe, it's just VassulaRyden.com?
The website, it is of the book, it's called heavenisrealbook.com.
Oh, Heaven is Real Book.
Heaven is Real.
Do you have one, Vassula Ryden, too? No?
TLIG.com.
Okay.
.org, sorry.
Okay. All right, so...
TLIG means True Life in God. That's all the messages in there.
True Life, TLIG.
G.
Dot.
Org.
Thank you. Okay.
That is the site.
That's right, True Life in God. I remember, yes. Okay, I remember seeing your material on that. Okay, great, super. All right, or heavenisrealbook.com.
And that is what we're talking about now.
Okay, we'll put those on the screen as well for folks. Okay. Vassula, we're going to take a quick pause here, okay, for folks, and we'll do this on our streaming site as well. And when we come back, we want to pause just a moment, and we're going to collect some questions from our live audience here in our studios that we might talk about and share just ahead. But also, I want to really focus on the next segment when we come back about the end times. I want to talk about the end times, and I want to have some specific things about where we are in society today and what really it means when we say end times. There's a lot of misnomers on this, and I want to discuss that ahead, as well as the fact that you're an amazing artist, and most people, we only discovered it by accident because you don't talk a lot about it, but your work is incredible, impeccable, in fact, and we're just amazed and these are your works, right? This is wow. Well, that is a God-given talent right there, to be able to do that, so your work is incredible.
Can I have also one question?
Yes.
In all what you want to know? I think people would like to know, how is God?
How is God?
I spoke to him face to face.
Okay, well, hold that thought.
How is God?
We're going to do that on the way back here. Vassula Ryden. Again, it's Malcom Out Loud. We'll be right back with you after this short break. Thank you.
Malcom Out Loud is brought to you by Zillergy. Zillergy. Connect. Grow. Expand.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the first part of the interview with Vassula Ryden, and you can find out more at heavenisrealbook.com. The book is Heaven is Real, but So is Hell. And in fact, I wanted to tell you, Vassula, welcome back with us, by the way.
Thank you, Malcolm.
You're just so well-spoken. It's such a pleasure to hear you speak on your journey here,
Thanks.
By the way, I wanted to tell you, today, I do what's called the Out Loud Minute. It's a nationally syndicated minute that runs on radio nationally, and we did it on Heaven is Real, but So is Hell today. Okay. So it ran on radio nationally today, your name and the book, by the way.
Okay, thank you.
So in talking about the message and where you were at. So so I thought that was a very good way to, let people know about our show today and the live stream that we have. A lot to talk about. I want to get back with you on here, and we've kind of taken you from your journey as a little child, 6 years old, all the way forward as a 10-year-old, a teenager, and many of the experiences you've had, the negative thoughts. We've got some questions. We're going to get into that in just a moment. I want to get right to and talk about end times, Vassula. And, all right, so All right, so I'm a news and political commentator. I speak about all the doom and gloom you could possibly want in your life, okay? It's what I do every day on radio nationally. So we're speaking of everything, Afghanistan, Syria, the Middle East, some very troubling spots in the world, and to many of the things here in our political establishment in this country and many other things that are happening in our environment and in our economies today as we sit here. It does seem like we're in some very troubling times. I remember we went last year through the Mayan calendar, and everybody was wondering if the world was going to end in 2012, right? Yeah. And we all sort of chuckled in the news business as things went through again, and nothing ended, and we thought, oh, another opportunity missed. The world did not end. In fact, we chuckle on it, this or that, but there is a seriousness to the topic of what we want to talk about now. You talk about it in the book, The End Times. And you said some of the words that were spoken to you, I'd like to repeat and say, from God, I am advancing like the clouds above you, yet many of you say you do not see me, generation. You rove to and fro through the riches of the world, but when it comes to see the spiritual treasures that can be poured on you, to vest you with myself in majesty, you pay no attention.
Yeah, well, you talked mostly about the political side, but it is combined politically with the spiritual side, because these end of times were already predicted in the scriptures in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, that you will recognize these end of times by the two signs, which will be, as I said before in the previous meeting we had, the spirit of rebellion, and the other one, the rejection of God, which is the apostasy, the great apostasy, meaning rejection of faith voluntarily, knowingly, So these spiritual, I would say, happenings, events, they trigger the political side, because whatever comes from the earth, which is, if an evil comes out from the earth, number one, the most evil is the rejection of God, our faith that God does not exist. And it is only us for the moment here in this time, what we can do now, and then there's nothing after that. Well, that provokes, the justice of God as well. I mean, he's coming all the way like a beggar in the beginning. That was about many years that when I started to receive the messages, begging us to return to him. He comes out of his mercy, out of his love, but we play deaf. They don't want to hear. Many people don't want to hear that. But when trouble comes and there are tsunamis, there are things that happen, earthquakes and all this, then they remember God to blame him only.
Yeah, we seem to wait for the worst things in our life to happen before we sort of take mention of that, don't we?
Yes, and they have to have a scapegoat then, and they will blame God. But it is us who draw the evil upon us, and even the wars. The Lord says, if we carry war in our hearts, it exteriorizes as a physical war. So, in the beginning when my angel approached me, he used to all the time tell me, make peace with God, make peace with God. And I said, wait a minute, I have no war with God. It was because I was not accepting God in my life. So it was like making war with God and make peace with God. And I remember these words very carefully.
So, Vassula, for time's sake, I'm going to ask you, we're going to go a few more minutes on this, and I want to ask you a couple of questions, and we'll keep the answers a little tight if you can for time, because we're running right out of time, and I have two other things to do real fast. Some of the questions from our audience. What is God's opinion of today's world?
He's lamenting. He's lamenting, and he said in a message, I wish I look at the world today. He says it exactly that, and I think it's in the book as well, and I wish I never did. He's so disappointed, so disappointed. But then he stretches out his hand all the way. I mean, come on. Just receive him, And if you read also his messages there's no way that you will doubt. Your soul can never be deceived when God, the shepherd, is really calling you. And so it's a plus in our life, God. So I would say that.
Well, human beings are an odd species. There's no question about it. Yeah. They really are. For real. I have better time communicating with the animals than I do sometimes the people. But anyways, another question. How do you define sin?
Well, sin is the opposite of the virtues. It's there are many ways that we can sin: by just the thought of judging people, by being nasty to people, wicked, and all what is opposite to the virtues.
We're very judgmental, first of all, as people.
And our tongue is the worst part, I can tell you.
I think there's a lot of greed. I think there's greed, pure and simple.
There's greed, there's egoism, there's selfishness, there's a lot of things like that. And there is a message that says the world has turned to be very cold because of hatred, egoism, selfishness. And that is why God is, He comes out from His throne to reach to us and save us.
All right. And next thing, I don't want to lose this because this was another great question. What role do you see for women in these times?
Depends what they are. I mean, the role of a woman depends what career they have and all that. But it all comes to the same thing: have God in your life. And first, the Lord says to everybody, not only to women, have me as first, and then the rest comes. Has me.
Yeah. 9/11, you talked about knowing this 10 years before the date, prophesizing that this event may happen indeed. And I see a question here, a very touchy topic in America, of course. When that day happened, having received a message from God about it, what went through your mind when you seen that happen?
Well, there were two things. One, that the prophecy came true 10 years before exactly by the date. And the second thing, the vision that I saw while I was watching Manhattan in a documentary on a TV channel, and then I saw it like falling in, the whole thing disappearing like a bomb had fallen, and I said to my friends, and this shall be no more as it is, it will be changed.
And it is being changed,
it has
no question
been changed,
about it. Joel, can we get a shot of these two pictures here quickly? This is some of Vassula's work right here. Tell us about this one, Vassula.
Well, this is the ultimate humility, it's called. And while I was painting, I'm very careful with the eye, that it should be alive. And it is, like he says there, and as he says it in the messages, what could I have done more that I have not done for you?
Yeah, fascinating. And look, this is beautiful. And she painted this. And tell us about this one here, if you would, please.
This is a picture of Our Lady, and I had a lot of trouble to do that with the brush because the brush was kind of opening all the time, and I didn't have time to, go and buy one. And I was thinking, wow, and in the end I managed to do it. So it was, I like this picture of Our Lady, that she's beautiful.
And you've done about how many pieces approximately of your art?
Oh, of this kind?
Yeah.
About 8 of them.
About 8. Okay, you've done other art.
Same, yeah.
You're very talented. Where can people find this art? Yeah, because
we can order this from, I think, tlig.org.
tlig.org, yeah. By the way, all the dollars that come in from the book, Heaven is Real, but So is Hell,
Pictures.
And the art goes to?
All what is this doesn't come to my account. It goes to the Bet Miriam, Houses of the Poor, that we have 25 now. I say we because I have collaborators, all volunteer work, no money in there. And it goes, all the money there in the Bet Miriam. Okay. The book, everything.
Right. And I wanted people to know that. In True Life in God, this magazine, which it looks really fascinating, you're pictured on the back here with all of these folks, all of these different religions. You meet once a year?
Every 2 years.
Every 2 years. Okay. And it's a pilgrimage.
This is the clergy only from 17 church denominations.
Wow. And you're pictured right in the middle here. It's absolutely beautiful.
Gathering together to talk about unity.
Unity, I love it. tlig.org is the website. You find out more. And I guess folks can subscribe to this magazine?
Everybody can subscribe, yes.
Okay,
yes.
Perfect. And so I've got that to look at a little bit later here. All right. I could talk to you for, days and days, and we still would not have enough time to do all this.
Well, this is, it's a lot of, I have to say a lot, because it's 27 years now, since I've been called and receiving these messages. And this book, Heaven is Real, but So is Hell, I think people will realize that there is a spiritual world surrounding us, and they will have to realize that God exists.
Yes. And that is the ultimate question that I know many people ask. And And it's one that we've talked about on the show indeed, so I think it's appointed to bring this show to you live. I hope you have enjoyed, and the websites, again, you'll see on the screen, heavenisrealbook.com. You'll find out more about Vassula there. And again, TLIG, truelifeingod.org. TLIG.org is another place you can find out more about her again. This show will be up, as you've been watching it stream live, it will be up and on demand in the next day or so, and we welcome you to do that and share it around the world with your friends and neighbors and folks. It's a pleasure to have you with me today. Again, thank you for taking the journey with us. It's Malcom Aloud here. Remember, get involved, get loud.